All right, welcome to the Human of Rock podcast. My name is Kevin, and I help musicians improve their musicianship and lifestyle. And today we have published author, motivational speaker, and dare I say philosopher, Danesh Hussain. Danish, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Kevin. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on your show. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Listen, it is a treat having you on the show. And for those of you that don't know, if you ever come across with Danish in real life, you will walk away with value. You will walk away learning something right after you have a quick 5 minute conversation with Danish himself. Listen, for context, adding on to the context, I remember the first time that we met, right? Danish and I, we go to the same open mic every Saturday night, and we always bump into each other at the same coffee shop that we go to. So I was working on my laptop, and then you came up to me, and then you said, "Hey, Kevin, I loved your performance." But it was the way how you delivered the compliment that stood out to me, because it was not just a compliment, it was your energy, the way you said it, and the vibe. I don't know, I can't describe it, but there was just something about your aura that stood out from all the other people I've met. And I've talked about this with other people, and you have a positive outlook in life, and then you have this aura where you are always looking for the good in the world, and you are always looking to evolve. You're always looking to grow as a person, and that's one of the things that you and I share. That's one of the things that we love to talk about. We love to talk about growth. We love to talk about philosophy, especially when it comes to creating. And as a matter of fact, that thought is what ended up driving was a driving force for your book, which is called High Vibration, on which we'll talk about it in just a second. Okay, so but before we start to talk about all of that, I always like to go back to the basics. So Danish, what's your story?
All right, Kevin. Well, thank you for your kind words. That's a beautiful introduction. And as I said, I'm happy to be here. Happy to count you as as a friend of mine. So it's great to be here. Well, my story, I had a successful corporate career, right, until about 2018. I checked off all the boxes that I had been raised, that I believed were uh, what would make me happy, right? The career, the car, the house, the family, and and I realized that the more of these boxes I checked off, the less happier I was becoming,
Mm.
and I was a bit confused because I thought it would be the opposite. I was always chasing, always looking to the future, always wanting more, 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 and I realized there came a point where it became almost like diminishing returns. Like the more I was doing, the less I was getting out of it. And I remember I was in a meeting, one of many meetings, and at a certain level, you have meetings just to discuss the meeting, right? And I remember in that very meeting, I was taking notes because I wanted to keep track of what was going on. And I remember writing either consciously or I would say subconsciously, probably both, that I'm done, right? That I couldn't do this anymore. Um, and so I went ahead, and the very next day I went to my boss. I was the vice president; he was the president, and I went to him and I said, I'm, I'm moving on, and I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do, uh, where I would go from there, but I knew that that just wasn't the thing for me. So that was kind of what started the process. And so the next couple of years were interesting because, I had such a strong identity with my career. Business card, the office, where I live, everyone introduces themselves based on what they do. Everyone is always sizing each other up when they meet to see how successful they are, how much money they make. And all of a sudden, I didn't have the corner office. I didn't have a title. You know, I was just Danish. I would hang out in coffee shops, read books, uh, and I remember it was very difficult for me because people always expect you to say what you do, who you are, and I was like, I'm none of the things I used to be. So who am I? So it was a process of rediscovering who I was. And I remember I was leaving a grocery store once, and this gentleman stopped me and said, "Hey, don't I know you?" And I said, "No, I don't think you know me." He's like, "You look like you look like somebody famous, or you look like, somebody I've seen
Mm.
before. And I said, I'm nobody. And he turned to me and he said, some of my best friends are nobodies.
Mm.
And in that moment, I finally realized that actually I was no longer all the things that I had identified with, all the things I had worked so hard to build up. I created a persona around myself that was like a mask. It wasn't who I really was. And so I was like, okay, well, who am I? I'm none of those things that I thought I was, none of the things I believed I was. And so, who am I? Who are we as human beings? What is the purpose of our time here? What are we trying to do? What is ultimately going to make us happy? What will fulfill us? And I started really asking myself some existential questions about how I wanted to live my life. And I never had, I mean, it wasn't, there was never one aha moment necessarily that said, aha, this is the answer, this is what I need to do. It was more of an evolving journey with lots of twists and turns. I did many things. After that, I did some consulting. I worked in financial markets. I helped people write books. I co-authored books, and then eventually I wrote my own book, High Vibration, which I shared with you. I studied how social systems work. I studied belief systems. I studied different, different religions, different philosophies. In helping understand how did I want to live the rest of my life, because it became clear to me during this process that I don't think that we are here as part of the human experience to suffer. Like, I
Yeah.
think that's not the point of this experience. We're here to grow, learn, to be creative. And what were the things in my own life that were preventing me from doing that? So that's kind of a bit of a backstory of how I got to kind of, where we ultimately met, in a coffee shop, not surprisingly, at an open mic, in a creative space, in a place where, everyone is encouraged to be themselves.
And that is such a powerful story. Like, thank you for sharing that. And at the same time, it is also a wake up call in a way, because I could definitely relate to your story, and I'm sure a lot of people can. But in reality, is that sometimes not everybody is able to have that realization and have that wake up call, because we all basically end up, from the moment that we're born, from our first couple of years walking on this earth, we start to embody we put on this costume, we put on this costume of expectations of what we're supposed to be like, and then our authenticity is stripped down, and we just become this self-manufactured identity, what that's by created by society, whether that's like our own family, whether that is the world, whether it is what we see. And that reality is that other people's or society's expectations may not align with what we want to be, or with what we want to desire to be and create, so that we can have a meaningful experience in this earth. And one of the things that I think that makes you a wise person is, throughout all of these years, you have been able to realize that, and you have been able to share that wisdom with a couple of people from our current open mic that we go to. And whenever we exchange thoughts, and we have conversations, how do you think watching other creative people get up and perform, how has that experienced your journey as a creator?
Well, it's been a profound journey for me. And first, I want to say that, I certainly don't know everything, and my own journey is an evolving journey, just like everyone else's. I'm still learning more and more with each passing moment about myself, about other people, about the world we live in. So, you may get to the point where you have a good understanding of life, and that's great. And you have some philosophies you align with. But, it's important to understand, but even those are evolving. Even beliefs that are held true maybe a year ago are also in evolution, and I think we're always evolving. And so, kind of my evolution, the creative space, of course, I mean, I never consider myself to be a creative person because I think that we are taught that creative people are artists and artists are painters, you know. But I believe that we all have a creative spark within us. It's just not always the same. So we look at artists or even sometimes a musician, you're like, okay, well, I'm not like them, therefore I'm not creative. I'm not an artist. And so I remember when I was working my book in the coffee shop in a corner on a Saturday, and I heard the music playing in the room next door, and I went to see what was happening, and I saw that, oh, there's an open mic going on here. I remember being very intimidated, In fact, I was like, oh, I love music, but I could never do what these people are doing. I mean, this is way outside my comfort zone, but I enjoy the music. So I started sitting all the way in the back, kind of like, out of the limelight, just kind of witnessing what's going on. And I really enjoyed the process of watching these people come up and play. And I realized that not everyone who is out there is at the same level. There's people who are creative and they've been doing that. They're the medium of expression that they're part of, or what instrument they play, or whatever they're doing for a long time, and they've developed a certain degree of mastery. But then there are also people who are just learning, and that they all can coexist in the same space. And so that gave me the courage to, say, okay, maybe I too can be part of this community. Maybe I too can share something. Maybe I have some value I can add. Maybe it's not the traditional playing the guitar, and singing like you do, but maybe I could speak about my writings, about my philosophies, about my own understanding, and maybe I could become part of this process because clearly there was a part of what was going on that resonated on a much deeper level with me. There was, the voice in my head was telling me, well, you don't belong here, this is not who you are, or you could never do this, it's too scary to stand up in a room full of strangers and talk about your feelings or whatever it is that you want to share. But then there was another part of me that, so I held that belief, but there's a part of me that is the truth of who I am, the truth of who we all were, that was like, no, I belong here, I have something to share, and somebody out there probably needs to hear what I have to say. And so that kind of gave me the courage. And as I started, you know so I first started by reading things from my book because I was comfortable with that, just standing there reading. Then I would have conversation with people such as yourself, we go back and forth. And then I started tailoring my spoken word pieces specifically to conversations that had, right? And so I thought, I mean, clearly I had evolved a lot to go from where I was until that point to where I was comfortable and published a book. But at that point, it was like I was now called to move in a different direction of creativity, which is, the expression, working in a community, sharing, my own words with people, and, and co-creating. I think you see some of the latest performances involve other people. And so the evolution has been profound for me. But again, the key takeaways were that creativity takes on many forms, right? And everyone's expression is unique to them. Just because it doesn't fit a societal mold doesn't mean it's not valid, right? Two, that there's always somebody out there that will appreciate what you're doing. But two, there's always somebody out there who is inspired by your story. You may not realize it, you may not have it in the moment, but I'm inspired all the time. Inspired by your own evolution, how you've gone from more of a shredder guitarist to more of a singer, and working on your voice and taking lessons and on your stage persona. I mean, that is inspiring to me because now, I'm not looking at the rock star performer from a place of like distance, from like, oh, I'm here, they're there. I'm like, hey, we're at the same space, we're sitting at the same table, we're ordering the same drinks. Like, wait a second, you and I, we're not that different.
And I think adding on to that, one word that comes to my mind is authenticity. Within your story, within my story, and then within the stories and ecosystem of the open mic, I think we are collectively I don't want to say traveling, but we are collectively learning how to embrace our own authenticity. And then we, each and every one of us, we're starting to peel the layers of the onion to just find our own authenticity, our own layer of truth in creativity. And it just keeps evolving over time. And I think that, you bring so much clarity and a guiding light to others within that creative space to help them find their authentic voice as an artist. So what I'm wondering is what inspired you to write your book High Vibration, and what inspired you to help others get in touch with their own authentic voice.
Well, people find this hard. I mean, people find it, interesting when I say this. I never set out to write the book.
Mm.
That was never my objective. It was around COVID, and I used, I guess I'm not the only person, but my life was turned upside down. All the things I was used to doing, the friends I used to meet, the places I used to go to, were all of a sudden no longer options for me. And I was almost forced into spending large amounts of time by myself. And I was not comfortable. I was a social person. I would always go out, and this idea of just being by yourself made me extremely uncomfortable, and then isolated from other people. So I started using journaling as a tool to feel better, to kind of even out my own emotional states. I was like, okay, you know what? I mean, I've always been, I would say, proficient writer because I always enjoyed reading as a child. So I think you spend a lot of time reading, you naturally pick up some attributes that allow you to then become a writer, or at least write well. And throughout my career, I also wrote proposals and things like that, technical documents. So I was comfortable writing. So I'm like, okay, well, I was comfortable with a pen in my hand. Right. Let's start there. And so I would write, I would journal my feelings, what I was thinking, what I thought about the world, what my own experiences of the, of life was. I realized, I'm like, okay, when I watch TV, I feel like I'm experiencing one reality. When I'm out in nature by myself, I feel like I'm experiencing a different reality. When I'm other people, I'm like, within one day, it's almost like I'm having like this multi-dimensional experience, where I have and I'm feeling different in each situation. But I'm like, I'm the same person. I'm living in the same town. Yet my experience seems to vary wildly from like very negative and scary to very positive and uplifting. So, why is this happening? What are the factors that are influencing my own experience to make it one way versus the other? So I started asking myself these questions, right? And as I would journal and try to understand them, this process went on for about a year and a half. And then when things opened back up again, I started going out again to coffee shops, meeting friends, things started opening up. And then we would have this conversation, what have you been doing? And I would share some of my insights, my own understandings of my own challenges and struggles during this period. And people would say, oh my God, that's really interesting. That's really helpful. Wow. And they'd come back and they'd say things like, oh, I thought about what you said, and oh, that was really profound. And I'm going to follow some of that stuff too. And I was like, okay, well, one, I'd only written this stuff for myself, right? Two, to get this kind of positive feedback was very encouraging. So I was like, okay, maybe if I share some of what I learned during this process, it might benefit other people. And, I love to learn, but I also love to share. For me, they kind of, I would say, what are my passions that go hand in hand, learning and then sharing what I've learned with other people so that they can you learn from that and then go on sharing, kind of what you're doing here. And so, then I started like, because I'd written everything handwritten, so I would start then typing up what I wrote in these journals so that people could read what I wrote. And then I would share the document here and say, hey, Kevin, remember we had this conversation. Oh, by the way, I wrote about this a couple of months ago. Here you go. Here's 3 pages, right? And then the people would come back and say, oh my God, that was profound. I shared it with my mother. I shared it with my brother. I shared it with my cousin. They really love this stuff. And so I was like, okay, so that encouraged me even more. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm onto something bigger here. And so then I went back to my journals, and I had like a stack of them on my, on my bookshelf, and I kind of put them together, and I started realizing, wait a second, if I put these pages together, I think I have a chapter. If I put these pages together, I may have a different chapter. So then I started realizing that, oh, wait a second, I may have a book here. And I will tell you one more thing. While this is going on, several people told me, you should write a book. Have you ever considered writing a book? I'm like, well, I've co-authored books, I've helped people with books, but I don't know if that's for me. I don't know if I want to do that anymore. But then slowly through this process, I'm like, maybe there is a book here. Maybe I can put together a book. So that process then took me another year and a half after that initial sharing of information to where I'm like, okay. And of course, as I wrote the book, when you have to explain something to somebody else, it forces you to go deeper. And when you get deeper, then your own understanding of the subject matter actually improves. It's when you go to teach something, you almost become better at it yourself. So that was kind of how, so I never really planned it kind of, at some level, maybe I did, but, it was a very organic process. And because it was organic and kind of just evolved naturally, I never felt overwhelmed that, oh my God, I have to write this book, or what am I going to do? So it was definitely a profound learning and growth experience for me. But yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but, I never set out to write the book, but the book almost wrote itself because of my own life experiences and, what I went through that was channeled into it.
And that is amazing in the sense that, like you said, the book sort of wrote itself. And I want to add on to the fact that what I like that you mentioned is that I think one of the things that makes us valuable as artists is that we just want to share. We're not doing this for any. Most of the time, whenever we create art, whenever we are, whatever that may be, whether it's a story, whether it's music, whether it's just anything in reality, our deep desire is to share that with the world. And that's also why I agree. What That's also why I think that the your process of writing the book was organic, because in itself it's like you automatically you want to share a lot of you want to share this value with the world, especially because you're getting great feedback from the people that you've talked to and all of that. And speaking about sharing, I noticed that you have become this third eye in the world of the open mic. You are interested in the process of watching people evolve, of watching people come from an audience member to a performer. And that process has captivated you to the point where you decided to start documenting and start creating a YouTube channel called Open Mic Love Story, where you're showcasing the creative journey of artists and creative people within the open mic. So, can you talk about your inspiration behind Open Mic Love Story?
Well, in a way, it's my own story,
Mm,
right? It's my own
yeah,
story because once there's a before you stand in front of an audience and perform whatever it is you're performing, there's an internal process that gets you to that point. For most of us, especially those who may not have done it when they were much younger, right? Who decided this later on in life, it can be a very scary process, right? So you have to overcome a lot of the limiting beliefs, and we can talk about limiting beliefs in the book section of this podcast too. But you have to overcome a lot of limiting beliefs that tell you that you're not good enough to do it. That nobody. What if people don't like what you have to say? What if you go and you mess up? So you have all these conversations going on in your head. And so I know that every person, because that was my own experience, I know every person who's standing up there has gone through a similar process. Like the work, people think that the performance is the work, but the performance is only a few minutes. you know
yeah,
it's like that's the destination, but the journey that got you to actually standing up there and deciding, I'm going to sing this Michael Bolton song, whatever the expression is for that person, or I'm going to do something different, or I'm going to try this out, I've never done this before. That to me is the inspiration part. Yes, I of course enjoy the music and that is great, but really I like the story about, I like the story behind it because it's my own story. I think it's everyone else's story, right? And I think the open mic is just an example of what we as human beings go through in learning, overcoming, expanding to where it's, that the final expression really of that whole process is the actual performance. So to me, it's inspiring. I'm very interested because I can see people from when they got there, just like myself, to kind of how they went from audience member, you said, to like performer, then performing with multiple people. And it's inspiring. It's great. It's fun to watch for me personally, just from the kind of themes that I like to explore. It checks it makes perfect sense to me. And so I, so the open mic love story project, which is a YouTube channel that features a lot of the these artists, that perform in open mics, is it I did it because I wanted to share with others these inspirational stories, because we think that only celebrities, we a lot of time when we see people, they're already deep into their career, right? So we look at them and we say, oh, look at this guy, but he's so good, that's not me. But we don't realize that person's performed that song 1,000 times, right? Or they've been playing the guitar since they were 8. Like it, so it can be a bit intimidating to see people on TV and say, yeah, I love them, they're great, but that can never be me, right? So when you see people who are perhaps not famous in that sense, in the traditional way in which we look at people who are, famous, but are doing amazing things and are relatable people, because these are people that are part of your own neighborhood, the people who are your friends, the people who you may share a meal with, you walk the same streets as them. You're like, okay, maybe it's not so impossible for me to dream that I could do it, right? And so that was kind of why I wanted to share that the experience of the open mic, and it's a really positive community in which people come together and they uplift and they help each other grow, which is very different because a lot of the experiences that are available to people today through which to grow through are competitive, right? So I'm growing as an athlete competing against you. I want to
Yeah.
beat you. I want to be better than you. In the corporate world, there's only so many positions available. Only one person can get that position. So now we're working together, but at the same time, we're kind of silently competing with each other. So, and that is for the most part a lot of what happened in the world. And I also believe through my own experiences that the human spirit thrives in collaboration more than it does in competition. And so the open mic is a great example of where you see people not competing with each other and thriving, but collaborating with each other and thriving. And I think the world needs to see that, to see, yes, there's another way of doing things.
Absolutely, 1,000%. And I think one of the things that you and I share is as well as other creatives within the open mic space is the whether whether that's consciously or subconsciously, is a process letting go letting go of perfectionism, of letting go of just that internal critic, and just embrace the process of becoming and creating art. And I think that all of us are learning that every single time that we perform in the open mic. So but overall, Danish, whoever you get to see in real life, whoever gets to have a conversation with you, it is a treat because you always have value to offer. So on that note, thank you so much for hopping on the interview and sharing your wisdom with me and everyone else that's watching. Guys, if you have a chance, please pick up the copy of Danish's book, High Vibration. If you're struggling with trying to find your own authentic voice, if you're struggling to grow and let go of your own inner critic and create the reality that you like so that you can experience a life that is more fulfilling, check out Danish's book. Is 1000% one of the best reads that you will ever come across in your life. I'll leave the link in the description, and you can also check out Open Mic Love Story. What I like, great YouTube channel to watch creative people evolve. Danish, once again, thank you so much for hopping on the Haven of Rock podcast, and we'll see you in the near future.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me. What an honor. What a pleasure. Thank you.
Take care.